Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Sorry I didn't upload yesterday. I was trying to get good footage for something, but it just didn't work. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be talking about a build that is called Mana Printer Ziggs. So not Mana Printer Sona, this is Mana Printer Ziggs. I'm not sure how competitively viable this build is, and I did not invent this build either. This build was invented by a guy called Dasik, who I'm going to link in the description below. He is a Russian, I believe, Twitch streamer, and he kind of brought this build out. It's on his channel. You can go and check it out. It's really interesting build. I really like it, and I think it's got an interesting play style. Before we get into the video, G2A sponsor the channel. There is a link to the marketplace in the description below. You can click it if you like. Thank you very much. Let's move on. So, the way that you play this build is pretty simple, and it actually functions very similarly to other hyper-roll builds in the meta right now, but it is so rarely contested that you can often get away with getting your units pretty much for free. I mean, you'd have to be incredibly unlucky. So the way it plays is it plays around the Mana Printer items. So in the early game, what I'm looking for are Malphites, I'm looking for Ziggs, and I'm looking for any other rebel to play around with these guys. So I want Malphites and Ziggs. Then I'm looking for like another rebel. So a good rebel, for instance, would be Master Yi or Sona or Yasuo. But let's just say that you find a Sona, for instance, and you just shove her on. So you're looking for like, and you don't have to position here. You can position wherever you like, really. I always like to put rebels a little bit further back because you have to make the triangle to make it work, right? So this is kind of what you're aiming for in the early game. Then what you want to eventually find is you can ditch rebels if you want to, and then you want to go for something like this, and then Twisted Fate over here or something, you know. So basically, you're going to end up having a comp where you've got the Blitzcrank, you've got the Ziggs, and you've got the Twisted Fate. This would be like my level 4 most of the time. You've got Chrono and you've got Ziggs. Any kind of mana items, and you're aiming for chalices for the most part, you just throw any kind of tier-based mana items that are chalice or seraphs onto Ziggs. And the ultimate goal is to have something that looks a little bit like your classic Mana Printer Sona. So there are two ways you can play it. You can play it like this, where you have double chalice and a Seraph's Embrace. The problem with that is that Ziggs has 45 mana, so he'll always have to get one basic attack in before he can throw his bomb. The other way that you can play it is double Seraphs and Chalice, that Ziggs just constantly bombs. You do need 5 tiers for this, so it can be nigh on impossible sometimes to make this happen, but you can play it like normal Mana Printer Sona, but it's a little bit worse, and it does damage instead of healing. Or you can play it like this, where you constantly throw bombs and you just give 10 mana to everyone around you at all times. There is a certain benefit to this build over the Mana Printer Sona build. What you want to do is at level 4, just after Krugs, what you're going to do is you're going to roll down and aim to hit 3-star Malphite and 3-star Ziggs. That gives you a really, really strong power spike with these two units. Ziggs basically one-shots anybody, right? And if you can, 3-star Twisted Fate, and if you can 3-star your Blitzcrank, great. But that doesn't have to happen instantly. These two are your primary roll-down targets, and then you're going to have the Chrono, and then this buff overall. Then what you're looking for is, as you head towards level 7, you're going to want Cho'Gath, okay? You're going to want Cho'Gath, and he is going to want to be in your build ASAP. You're going to want Vel'Koz over here, and you're going to want Kha'Zix. Wherever Kha'Zix is, I can't do the alphabet. There we go. Something that also worth noting is if you can roll down and find Kha'Zixes when you do your roll down, please try and find a 3-star Kha'Zix because it makes him really strong. But obviously, you don't put him on until you've got the rest of the Void. You could probably put a 3-star Kha'Zix on by himself and he'd be strong. But if you have a 2-star Kha'Zix, don't bother putting him on until you've got the rest of the Void bonus going. And this would give you 2 Sorcerers, 2 Chrono, Void, and Brawler, okay? And then at level 8, you have options. You can either throw in, if you've got a 3-star Kha'Zix, I would recommend throwing in a Fizz for the Infiltrator buff. Or, if you don't have a 3-star Kha'Zix and you only have a 2-star Kha'Zix, I would recommend throwing in a Vi, which would give you the Brawler buff. So this basically gives you the Void Brawler mana battery. In terms of itemization, you've got the Ziggs items. This build is really good on Treasure Trove, but I like to put like a Thief's Gloves. Where the hell? There. Thief's Gloves on my Kha'Zix. I like a Morello's, if I can get it, onto my Vel'Koz. And also, part of the thing that makes this build strong is that you can put a demo spat on Vel'Koz, and then suddenly you're just starting to stun everybody with your laser beam. which is kind of what makes this build quite strong, is that you have the option to go Demo Spat Vel'Koz. Now, in terms of actual mana delivery, this is worse than Sona. So this build is actually worse than Sona in terms of mana delivery. But you spike a little bit harder in the mid game because you get the 3-star Ziggs. You don't have a lull, and it's a little bit safer because you don't. If you can get the 3-star Ziggs, the 3-star Malphite, etc., you don't drop off as hard. GA on Cho'Gath, by the way, because you can try and get him to 3-star. And obviously your 3-star priorities would, in the late game, would be Cho'Gath and Vel'Koz if you have the sort of the items to do so. And that would be the overall look at the build. So let's have a look at a game that I played it in, and we can talk about the decisions. Just to remind you guys, I did not invent this composition. I do not want you guys to feel like I've invented this composition. I don't want to take anything away from the excellent player that is Dasic. He's just an incredible player, so I don't want you to feel like it was me that sort of invented this. In terms of carousel priority, sorry, I'm going to cough. That was the most pathetic cough. I felt like the cough was going to be more than that, but it ended up being pathetic. In terms of carousel priority, you want Tier, and then you want Negatron Cloak until you can get at least 1 or 2 chalices, but Tier needs to be your priority pretty much at all times. The best galaxy for this is obviously Treasure Trove. The more items, the better, the more likely it is to get the tiers. But yeah, that's the best galaxy, followed by Reroll Galaxy, because you're going to get your ability to get the free rerolls, which is especially useful, especially when you're trying to go for 3-star Vel'Koz and 3-star Cho'Gath. Early game, again, you are looking for either the Brawler starts, you want the Malphites, you want the Rebel start as well, so the Rebels are always on the cards as well, so you play for that. In terms of gold, I actually sold off my Blitzcrank. The reason being is I was not entirely sure where this game was going to take me, because I only got 1 tier to start with. I really wanted to force this build for the video. This build is being forced in a normal, by the way. But I wasn't quite entirely sure where the build was going, because I obviously found a rod and a recurve bow, which isn't necessarily the best start for the build that I was playing anyway. So in terms of hoarding units, I'm hoarding a couple of Rebels. I'm obviously hoarding Ziggs, Twisted Fates. One of the things that you might struggle with in this build is if there's lots of Poppy players in your lobby, you might end up finding that you are competing against Poppy players quite heavily for Twisted Fates. So I made a bit of an error early on in selling the Malphites and selling the Blitzcranks, but I'm not going to make that error again. And you can see here I've got 4 Ziggs, which is a really, really good start for Ziggs in general. What you're going to see me do over the course of the next few rounds is I'm going to sacrifice sacrifice health to build an economy. Whenever I'm playing, this is ridiculous. Whenever I'm playing this kind of build, I always like to prioritize economy as a number 1. Economy should be my absolute utmost concern, because I want to have the most gold possible to roll down when I get to the Krugs, or just after the Krugs. I want to have the most gold physically possible to be able to roll down effectively. So my priority in this situation is getting a good economy going. Now, obviously, you need to balance that with HP. You do need to make sure that your HP is staying at a relevant level, but for the most part, like in the early game, whenever I'm playing reroll comps like Poppy, Zaya, or even this one, which is kind of like a half reroll comp. Nah, it's not even a half reroll comp, it's just actually a reroll comp. I'm aiming primarily to get a good economy going. If I can have 50 gold by the Krugs and not be on 70 HP, I've had a good early game. And you can see so far that I've only got 2 rounds until the Krugs, and at 92 HP, I would have to have a pretty catastrophic start to sort of end up in that position. So the first mistake that I made this game is I put a needlessly large rod on Twisted Fate. I thought, do you know what? I'm probably going to find another rod, so I can put one on Vel'Koz later on. Well, spoiler alert, everybody, I didn't find another rod, at least not for a long time. So that was a mistake. If you have a rod, do keep hold of it, because in this Treasure Trove Galaxy, you are quite likely to find a spatula, and you do want to make sure that you get the Vel'Koz with the demo spat. That is the prime way of playing this. The other mistake that I made is quite clear as you can see. I actually have now 5 Twisted Fates, so I'm only 4 Twisted Fates away from getting a Twisted Fate 3, and I don't really want to sell my Twisted Fate now, because a Twisted Fate 3 is probably more important in protecting my HP compared to getting rid of that rod and then trying to make something work with it. So we end up at around 76 HP by the Krug round, which is actually what I would call a success in this particular scenario. I am over a certain gold threshold, and that's great. Something else that's worth noting right now is that I didn't pick up many Kha'Zixes on my way up here. That's because I was still trying to figure out what I needed for the build. This was the first time I've ever played the build in a game, so I was kind of learning as you guys were. And essentially, I wasn't quite sure what I was supposed to be prioritizing in terms of units. But I can now tell you that, yes, you need to pick up Ziggs, Malphites, and Twisted Fates. There should be the 4 units that you're... Ziggs, Malphites, Twisted Fates, and Kha'Zixes. You should be looking to aim for those. And now we're going to do our roll down. And again, prioritizing Malphites, prioritizing Ziggs, prioritizing Twisted Fates, and also Kha'Zixes when we can find them. So you can see here I am picking up Kha'Zixes as we go. I'm rolling down, picking up Blitzcranks if the space allows for it, and I'm going to continue to roll down during my my fight here with this guy who's already got a 3-star Malphite. So, you know, I basically had a pretty successful roll down here. I found most of my Kha'Zixes, most of my Twisted Fates, and I only need 3 more Malphites to get into to a Malphite 3. And I actually also found another 2-star Blitzcrank. So we are just pretty close to getting some big power spikes in this scenario. We have the 3-star Ziggs already with a Chalice, and we also obviously have the... We also obviously nearly have our 3-star Twisted Fate, which would be pretty insane too. So you can just see that the damage that Ziggs does at this stage in the game is really strong. And if you get the double Seras version, he will just constantly ult over and over and over again. The double Chalice version is okay, but I don't think it's as good as double Chalice Sona, for the simple fact that I don't think it's as good as double Chalice Sona, just for the simple fact that she ults constantly with 1 Seraph, whereas Ziggs needs to take 1 basic attack in between his ability and then the Chalice actually going off. So it actually slows down the Chalice mana generation by a significant amount. But again, both builds are perfectly viable. I just think that the double Chalice 1 Seraph version is slightly weaker because Ziggs 3's damage is actually really strong. So you shouldn't count out the damage that Ziggs 3 can do, because he recently just got buffed and it's actually pretty insane. Alright, so at this carousel, we're on round 3. We are looking to add another tier to our Ziggs. And obviously then look for our either double Chalice or Seraphs here. So that's going to be my priority. Really, you just kind of have to play what the game gives you in this instance. And I'm kind of holding on to items right now because there are, again, I'm playing Treasure Trove. The likelihood that I get some really good item combinations is pretty strong. So I'm waiting to get what I would feel would be optimal item combinations. I'm not going to slam the demo Twisted Fate Ziggs, the demo Twisted Fate just yet, because I would like to get that on my Vel'Koz as a matter of priority. If I cannot get it on the Vel'Koz, it's okay. I can put it on the Twisted Fate. I could think of worse units to have a demo spat on than Twisted Fate. If I'm completely honest with you, I can definitely think of worse units. So now that I've got Twisted Fate 3, and I have almost a Malphite 3 and almost a Kha'Zix 3, my goal is to get to the relevant levels so I can actually have things like my Cho'Gath and my Vel'Koz on the board. So I need to get up to level 7 as an absolute priority. Level 7 is where this build comes online. If you have a 3-star Ziggs and a 3-star Twisted Fate, or a 3-star Ziggs and a 3-star Malphite, or a 3-star Ziggs and a 3-star Kha'Zix, I would recommend that you go for level 7 as quickly as possible and let the game naturally give you the rest of your 1 costs, because there was no point me rolling down here. The power increase that I would get from a 3-star Malphite is not strong enough to warrant me rolling 30 gold away. So that's the decision that I made in this scenario. Right here, I decided to go for the double Chalice because it's the best option that I have at this point in time. I also have a set of sparring gloves, and that actually means that I can get a really strong Kha'Zix with a Thief's Gloves. That's what I'm going to save those 2 Brawler's Gloves for. I genuinely think Kha'Zix is super strong, and at 3-star anyway, especially in Void, and just the Thief's Gloves is just the natural set of items that I think would work really well on him. So unfortunately, my win streak ends here. We don't lose by a huge amount, but we are now at 50 gold, which is really important, because now we're at 50 gold, we can start to use that interest to generate levels and then work towards getting towards the Void bonus. So we need 2 more levels at this point. We're looking for Cho'Gath and we're looking for Vel'Koz. That would be our priority. And then once we get those guys, we can actually start doing some serious damage in these team fights. What I will tell you is that just based on the items that I'm going to have in my Ziggs, I'm obviously going to be slightly worse off than if I was playing the Void Printer Sona build. If you haven't seen the Void Printer Sona build, essentially this build is focused on giving mana over to Cho'Gath and to Vel'Koz, and they just ult constantly, right? So that's the point of the Void Printer Sona build. She basically just constantly gives mana over to Vel'Koz and to Cho'Gath, and they essentially just ult all the time. So this guy actually was playing a really interesting build. He's playing like, I think it's like Void Infiltrator, where he's kind of, I guess, focusing on getting Kha'Zix are really strong, and he actually has a lot of the units that I was competing for. So I was not expecting to have to compete for Malphites and for Kha'Zixes, but unfortunately I was. Luckily, there are 29, I think, 29 one costs in the pool, so there is enough space for up to 3 people. There's enough space for up to 3 people to get their 3 stars, so you can technically compete with 3 people to get your 3 stars. Now, I find the Ziggs with the Seraphs, which is really nice. That's a good start. And now we're going to add the GA to the Cho'Gath, which is a good item here. And then obviously we're going to be looking for a Vel'Koz, and then working our way to level 7 to fit that Vel'Koz in our team. I think at this point, because we only have one more neutral round left, where I could get a what's it called? A needlessly large rod. As soon as I hit that neutral round, and if I don't find a needlessly large rod, I'm essentially just going to put the demo spat on my Twisted Fate. It would have been better if it were on Vel'Koz, but it being on Twisted Fate is not a huge deal. Twisted Fate still has a form of Area of Effect ultimate, which means he can still make use of the demo spat, and he still has a similar mana value. He's only got 5 more mana than Vel'Koz, or 5 less mana than Vel'Koz, I can't really remember, and actually he still can have impact with that item. It would have been better on Vel'Koz. I just assumed that given it was Treasure Trove, I was going to get at least one more needlessly large rod, but that obviously was not the case. As you can see, I haven't yet found one, and I think I don't find one on this set of neutral rounds either, which was a bit of a bummer, because I think demo spat Vel'Koz would have been much better. But it is what it is. You can't always find the items that you want. And we find another tier. So we could have actually played the double Seraphs. I think we could have actually played the double Seraph Ziggs here, but obviously it's my first time playing the build, so I wasn't entirely sure. I give the Zero over to my Malphite because I'm aiming to get into 3-star, and I use the other spat to make a Rebel Medal for my Twisted Fate, which is going to increase my Twisted Fate's damage, but also more importantly increase the damage that my Ziggs is doing. Now you can see there is one basic attack in between every cast of my Ziggs, but we are in a super strong position right now. We just need to find the Vel'Koz, and I think we're in a spot where we can essentially start to relax a little bit and start to gain levels. So we find the Vel'Koz. I was considering giving the Twisted Fate my Spear of Shojin, and actually I think in retrospect giving the Twisted Fate my Spear of Shojin would have been a good call. But now we're just going to be looking for our 3 stars. This build is like kind of completed at this point in time, so we are primarily looking for our 3 stars right now. And then once we find our 3 stars, we're in a good spot. As you can see, we're still losing to the guy with the other side of the Void build. And I'm just rolling here. I'm looking for primarily my Blitzcranks, my Malphites, my Cho'Gaths, etc., etc. We're so close to finding some big 3-star upgrades right now. That, it's worth doing a little bit of rolling, because those 3-star upgrades, especially Blitzcrank, is super strong. So, that would be a really, really nice upgrade. And then we want to find 2-star Vel'Koz, and we want to find 2-star Cho'Gath at a minimum. So they are obviously matters of priority too. So there is a guy running Blitzcrank. I think there are a couple of people running Blitzcrank here. So there are a couple of things to think about when dealing with a Blitzcrank in this scenario. I don't actually have a defensive item like a QSS that I can put on a unit that goes in the corner. That would have been the high priority for me, like getting a QSS if I could find one. But I ended up getting a GA, which I'm going to just slam on my Vel'Koz. I think it's probably the best target for my GA, just because he's a unit that when he comes back, his ultimate is actually pretty impactful. But my goal now is to find my 3-star Malphite and then go up to level 8 so that I can add a unit that can backline effectively. And if he gets pulled by the Blitzcrank, it's not a big deal. But you can see this build is actually super strong once it's online. The build actually does some serious work. This is not the optimal version of the build, I don't think. I think Day 6 version is probably the optimal version. He is obviously one of the best players in Europe. If you don't know who Dasik is, he's just a super good player. He's one of the best players in Europe, so As you can see here, I just tried to go roll down for my 2-star Kha'Zix, just because, you know, we're top 4 now, and it's important that I maintain strength versus a lot of the other players. And actually, you can see that our build has started to come online really well. We've started to really ramp up in terms of damage. We've got the 3-star Kha'Zix, we've got the 2-star Vel'Koz, and now we're going to essentially eco up and chill. So this itemization was interesting. I think I give the Jeweled Gauntlet to the Vel'Koz. I give the Ludens over to my Cho'Gath for an extra bit of mana, and then we just give the Last Whisper to my Malphite. Now, the reason I give Last Whisper to Malphite is he's actually just got quite a lot of basic attack damage. Even though he's a slow attack speed, he's actually got quite a lot of base attack damage. So especially versus Vanguards, and I was playing with my friend Spook, and he was playing Vanguards. The Last Whisper on someone with high attack damage versus Vanguard is actually pretty important, so that's why I made that decision. Positionally, I was trying to figure out the best way to position this build and was actually struggling just a little bit. I think the best way to position this build is I actually prefer doing it in the middle. A lot of people like doing it on the side, but I actually prefer positioning this build in the middle. And you're going to start to see why eventually, because we end up losing quite a lot of rounds to several players. We mostly end up losing to the other Void player, who's actually got a really good solid setup for his Kha'Zix, and his Kha'Zix is doing some serious work. So I end up losing quite a lot of rounds to that Void player, putting me at a pretty low HP. You're going to see it here. Like his Kha'Zix just like one-shots my stuff. Like he literally just absolutely destroyed my Ziggs. And it's really important that your Ziggs stays alive in this build, because he's the mana printer. He's the unit that's getting you he's the unit that's essentially getting you into the driving seat. Now what I do is I end up putting in Lux, but I actually think that Fizz is better. It took me a while to like figure it out, but I'm running a 3-star Kha'Zix basically. So I'm running a 3-star Kha'Zix, and it's really important to actually try and utilize all of your resources as effectively as possible. And 3-star Kha'Zix is just super strong, right? 3-star Kha'Zix is just actually just insanely strong. So getting myself a Infiltrator for Kha'Zix means he's going to reset his attack speed every time he gets a kill or assist, which is actually super good. And I found 2 Fizzes, and I just thought, do you know what? It's actually better probably to have the Fizz in this scenario. And I think now we're in a pretty good spot. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move my... This is how I feel this is how I personally like to position this build, okay? I personally like to position this build like this because I feel like it gives Vel'Koz a better way to spread his beam. He doesn't have to like spam across the board as much, and I actually think it gives him more effective clear than having him on the side. I do understand that makes him slightly weaker to things like infiltrators, but I just think having the setup a bit more like this is better overall. And you can see, like, I'm trying to avoid the Shroud of Stillnesses. The reason I'm trying to avoid the Shroud of Stillnesses is because I don't want to get my Ziggs destroyed. And I'm also putting my Malphite at the back to try and counteract the Blitzcrank. Like, I want my Malphite at the back so that I'm not having my Vel'Koz pulled in this instance. And that's actually what worked out really nicely here. And I actually think the way that we positioned was much better than the way that we had before. In terms of items, the Hand of Justice is actually pretty good, and I'm going to give it to Blitzcrank, because if I get the ability damage one as Blitzcrank at 3-star, he's actually going to one-shot someone. So actually putting it on Blitzcrank is, in my opinion, a good idea, just because if I can hit the ability damage one, that's just a super good thing. So I noticed him switching some stuff over. I thought he was actually moving over to my side. So I decided to try and bait him and move over to the other side, like this. I baited myself and still got hit by the Shroud of Stillness, which is really annoying. But no one was on my Ziggs, which is the most important thing here. No one being on my Ziggs is actually super good, because you can just see that he kind of wrecks everybody with his ability, and that's the comp. Yeah, it's fun. Enjoy it. Try it out. It's not contested. It might actually get you some ranks.